How's everyone doing? Everyone awake? All right. Hello to everyone in the audience and online. We have a pretty big panel here today, and Jeff had asked me to do this as sort of an in-source, outsource kind of panel. And one of the main evolutions that I saw in community management is sort of, I think, a little bit of an identity crisis, and sort of the evolution and the different takes. So I have a wonderful panel here of all different types of community management and different sort of approaches. So just to do a quick introduction, to my left here is Katie. She's a social marketing manager at Billboard. Matt is director of brand strategy and emerging media at 360i. We have Danya, who's community manager at Skillshare, and Staci, who is the New York City community manager for Eventbrite. And so I guess to start off, does anyone want to take the question of exactly what is community management? Danya, I think you had some ideas around that.
Sure. So when I started my job as the community manager at Skillshare, I was coming from the nonprofit world. I had no idea what a community manager was, but I loved the company that I was about to work for. So I just did a ton of research. And I think this is going to come as no surprise to anyone. But what I found was that being a community manager is really being 10 different things. So whether that's being the PR and marketing person, whether that's being a recruiter, whether that's being a customer support manager, whether that is being like the internal community manager and culture builder for your team. But I think just the main message that I would want to share, given my experience and meeting lots of other incredible community managers, is that I don't even think it's a great title because we all have different jobs. But we all call ourselves the same thing. And so I think at the end of the day, being a community manager is purely about understanding what your company is about, what your people need, and then just finding a way to bring it to them.
Right. It definitely takes a lot of different roles. I was actually, earlier in the week, I was out in the burbs of Jersey, and I was talking to someone who's heavily involved in social media, and he was like, it's really interesting because I think here, I don't see anyone with that title and that position yet. Working with CM Meetup and getting a lot of job posts here in New York City and bigger cities, it's a title you hear often and one that's actively recruiting for jobs. So, I think that's interesting. And especially for you, Danya, you started at Skillshare sort of at the very beginning of a company, a young startup. And I think you're in the unique position to really create that brand community identity. So what kind of things were you looking at and researching and factoring in when you were creating the Skillshare community brand?
Sure. So full caveat, still doing that. But from the get-go, it was a lot about research online and offline. So generally, like, what is a community? How do I build one? What are the most important tenets? Obviously, one of the biggest things that came from anything that I read and my in-person interactions was that, like, you just have to be a normal person and be authentic and talk to people and listen to people. But I tried to figure out, like, who are the thought leaders in community management. So I had never heard of Connie Benson. I had never heard of, like, the community manager meetup, like none of those things. So first it was just really big picture. But then in terms of our community, I had to go to every single class that we ever put on. We're an online marketplace for offline classes. So every single time somebody was teaching in the area since we started locally, I went to class. And met teachers, figured out what their pain points were, what students were loving about the classes that they were going to. So it was a big combination of online and offline research, more generally about community management, but then also about the people in our community. And I would say from there, it really, like, the very first thing that I did was just set a foundation. Mm-hmm. So while I was learning from our community what they needed, we just didn't even have anything set up for anyone else to help. Everything from like a support philosophy. Are we doing all team support? Is it just me? Is it just two people? How are we going to interact with our customers or our community members? To our social media kind of manifesto, like which platforms are we using? What's relevant for us? What's our voice going to be like? So a lot of that kind of foundation setting, so that now, like, I have somebody who's just helping me out with social media, and I was able to say to her, here's how we speak, here's how we interact, like, you can have the freedom to do what you want to do because you understand how we want to put ourselves out there. And then, from there, once the foundation was set, anyone and everyone on our team could help interact and support our community. And we've kind of evolved now into the point where we're kind of moving from being super product focused to being much more consumer focused, meaning that my life has changed a lot from doing support and setup and figuring out where to even begin to give people what they want, to listening and only focusing on that. So like tons of user feedback conversations in person, like bringing people into the office for lunch and having people from our product team in those conversations, and learning how to balance a two-sided marketplace, which is what we have. So trying to provide really incredible content like classes for our community, but then also ensure that our teachers are having an incredible experience by having people come to their classes. So I would say the evolution has been kind of tons and tons of research, figuring out what to even do in the first place, big picture, learning what our existing early adopter community was all about and what was making them happy or not, and then kind of scaling out to have our entire team of 11 people be able to contribute and participate in community support and in going to classes and understanding what to do with the information they were learning.
And a lot of the startup vibe is sort of that product, questioning and learning what's working, learning what's not, and really bringing that to the product team, right? So got your hands full there. And I really like that concept of online and offline. And when I was at Bizzy, that was a big thing for us, was sort of how do you take that online conversations and meeting people online and really getting them to connect offline, off our app, et cetera. And I think, Staci, you're a local community manager, so we had very similar positions on that. And so with Eventbrite, I know you came in and you're one of, the 5 or 6 in the beginning of the Eventbrite local community manager. And I was wondering if you had any sort of tips and your experience on helping others really connect with people offline.
Absolutely. Eventbrite is an online company as well. It's ticketing, but it's for social events, so events are inherently social. Luckily, we spend a lot of our time out with people, lunches, meetings, et cetera. And I came on as the 5th event manager or event evangelist, and now we're a total of 8. Also, we just expanded internationally, so it's really interesting that you're a face in a community and you're speaking directly to the people who use your product and, really hearing what they have to say. And I think it's just so exciting when you're like, oh, I'll come help you. And they're like, what will you do? For free? You'll just come do that? You're like, yeah, of course. We're here to help you use our product, utilize it better. And what's amazing is when I have this group of people, we all have different, strategies and different, different needs and different, we're different metros. And we have each other to rely on. So I have someone I can talk to that's been in market for a year. I help the people that just started a month ago, what works for you in the Northeast or what works for you in the South. We also have someone in London now, which is amazing. So if we have international events, we can actually band together, which I think is the most important part, and help people around the country and now around the globe. So it's really, I think it's using each other and using our experience and really kind of learning that way. And the best advice I got from my coworker in Dallas was, it is a marathon, it is not a sprint. You are not going to meet everyone in the first month. You will not meet everyone in the first year. Take your time, really cultivate those one-on-one relationships. And I think our biggest, our biggest win as a team is our connections, our ability to connect people within our community to really make their event or their brand or whatever they're trying to accomplish through an event greater.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point that you said there, that it's a marathon. And I think, for me, one of the distinctions with community maybe versus sales is that you're cultivating the relationships and you're not sort of doing that, I want your business card now, I'm going to call you and make this happen. It's a little more over time. And I know with CM Meetup, I'm really cognizant to make sure that our community understands that. You're not here to pitch our audience. You're not here to take everyone's business cards. You're here to start building relationships, and over time, those will only develop and get better. And I know, Danya, we connected offline. And, to anyone in the audience, I really suggest finding key community members, key influencers that you want to meet with, and really connect with them offline, because it goes tenfold. And I think most of you, except for Matt, who I just met here, have been a result of that.
Though I have hired someone from a CM Meetup, actually.
Awesome. See, great. I think Dave might be in the audience, so for the organizers, we're very happy to hear that. Yeah. And Katie, now I just want to turn the attention to you a little bit. You came into Billboard over the summer, a brand that, when I researched, was surprised to find was over 100 years old. And it seems like they've been online for quite a while. And how has the transition in music, with Spotify and really the revolution that's going on in the music industry, and has for many years, beginning with Napster. But on the social front, with the brand, how are you kind of adapting that currently? And what are some of your challenges, excitements? What are you finding?
So it's quite a big job because we are a 117-year-old brand. Our 117th birthday was last week. Go us.
Yeah. Happy birthday.
Yay. And through that, we actually, and I say we because I shared this with the teams that aren't attached to Twitter and Facebook and Tumblr and Instagram and everything that we're on like I am all day, but we have so much love for our brand from the people, even if they just come to check out our charts, because that's obviously what we're known for. But what we're lesser known for, but still do, are we do events, sometimes free, sometimes paid. We did a pop-up concert with LMFAO and Swizz Beatz this summer, 100% free ticketing. We didn't announce the venue until the day before. You had to register with your smartphone for a ticket, and we pushed that out via Twitter and sold out the concert within about 36 hours. So we do fun stuff like that. We put on conferences. We have one going on today that I'll be leaving here after lunch to go to. And that's awesome. We've got an award show that we're doing. We obviously do the Billboard Music Awards every year. We have business-focused editorial. We have print editorial with our magazine. And we have consumer-focused editorial as well. So combining all of those things and making sure that we stay relevant is a big challenge, but we listen. I think that's the biggest thing, is whether it's someone in India tweeting us to say how much they love our brand, or someone tweeting us to say, hey, can you help me with my subscription? We listen. We're starting to pull more tweets into our editorial content. So for example, and I hate to use this as the example, but it's probably the most current one, Heavy D passed away yesterday, RIP. We did an article because a lot of artists jump on Twitter to share their condolences, to share their thoughts. And I was around when Amy Winehouse passed away, when Steve Jobs passed away. That stuff gets really emotional. We've now been saying, here's what everyone else has been saying, here's their impact on music. Not even just here's their top 10 hits, but here's the reaction to that, and actually crafting editorial pieces around that content. And then also letting the people know, if it's not superstars, for example, and just Leah Marino saying something about a musician, hey, you've been mentioned in one of our articles, go check it out and see what we thought was important that we wanted to share that you had to say. Or putting people in the magazine when Facebook's F8 happened, because that was huge. So I definitely know that we really care to be on the cutting edge, but smart, because we do have a brand presence and a brand, I guess people like us, which is awesome, and they respect our knowledge. So we're not going to go and chase every new hot startup and be the first movers all of the time, but we are going to be the first movers strategically, and we're also going to listen and adapt. We just launched a Tumblr page because musicians take to Tumblr. We wanted to communicate with that community. We kept having people link to us in Tumblr articles, and we weren't there. So now we are, and it's really an evolution for us, because there's a long way that we can go and a long way that we will go, but we're taking it in smart strategic steps. So it's a constant battle between me wanting to run the sprint and knowing that what I'm actually running is a marathon.
Right.
And that's my own internal battle to fight. Speaking of challenges.
And you had an interesting point on our call that Billboard acts as sort of that intermediary brand between people that are really fans of Justin Bieber and Amy Winehouse, et cetera. So what are you finding challenges-wise in keeping an audience that might want to learn about the passage of new albums that might be relevant but really are only there because you had a really interesting Justin Bieber interview?
I think we just honestly try and stay current and try and stay out there. So, if stuff happens, we are a news organization, so we're also a publisher, so we cover the big breaking news. We stay on top of that. But if I notice that someone is responding to us more often, I will put them on kind of my little follow list and start proactively responding to them and proactively sharing articles. We develop relationships with fan sites for that specific purpose. And it's not hey, we want to come in and dump some content in your community and then leave, because that's spammy. It is hey, we've written about this, or your favorite artist is coming in for a live Q&A soon, or we have this awesome opportunity for you. We know that they care about us because we have the access to their artists.
Right.
So that is the angle of which we approach them, which I don't want to just sit there and dump our content in their laps. That's not a smart move. What I do want to do is build relationships so that when they're hearing about a next up-and-coming artist and they're asking us where our coverage is, I can then respond and say, awesome, you're now paying attention to us enough to proactively ask us what's going on with us. That reinforces our brand value, and it's done by building relationships.
Yeah, wonderful. And really to kind of turn the attention now, well, everyone here else has talking about a little more in-house. And that, honestly, admittedly, I'm always a little weary about outsourcing community and that kind of engagement. And you work with brands like Kraft and Coca-Cola and JCPenney, you said. So what's that relationship, making sure the brand is relevant and in voice between your community where, you have, what did you say, like 30 community managers
30,
and stuff?
35 community
Yeah,
managers.
and that's a pretty big team and more than, I think the rest of us would love to have that, in-house. So that's one clear advantage. But, can you talk to us a little bit about how that relationship works?
Sure. So the relationship with the client is obviously a very important one. We work with big brands. We work with some large enterprise global corporations, and understanding what their voice is, understanding what their priorities are, is obviously paramount to our success. And we've got a very rigorous brand immersion process at the outset where we kick off and onboard properly, and it gets to a point where the community manager could just as easily work for our client as they could work for us. But I think the advantage that we have is that the access to the intellectual capital across the group is really pretty outstanding. Think of the different size communities we have, all the things we can learn, the data that we get, the best practices that we learn from one community can be applied to another, even if they're very, very different as far as what the goals and objectives are. So understanding the platform is key. We help educate our clients as to the best ways to leverage the platform, as well as really just tapping into the larger creative team as a whole. So we have 35 community managers, but we've got another 30 just social strategists. We differentiate between people who are activating and people who are creating the strategy. So when we come together, it really is just a fun, creative brainstorm every day, knowing that we have to represent the brand or the client in the social space.
Okay. We're running out of time a little bit here, but, Matt, back to you, sort of, let's just kind of go around and say that one tip. One of the parts of this was lessons learned. So far I'm hearing, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. I think it's very true and sometimes hard to kind of keep focused on when you're working in an online space that's changing so quickly. But Matt, any tips?
Yeah, I think the key is understanding what content will engage for us, the consumer, in a way that drives that emotional connection. Everyone talked about building a relationship. Sure, we're in marketing, but for me, I don't think of what we do as marketing. I think of it as just another way to communicate and interact, knowing that as we filter things through our strategic lens, it does have to build that emotional connection. Otherwise, people aren't going to care what we say. Right. So that's the long-term investment that we make.
And are you deciding that based on Facebook analytics, Twitter replies back to that content? How are you sort of measuring that?
Yeah, there's a combination of deep, heavy listening across the industry. So we've got an insights team that is just listening to what people in our target are doing on Facebook, on Twitter, and then understanding what our competitors are doing, as well as understanding what our direct audience is most engaged with. So it's really a combination of those three things, but listening in real time and engaging, as Jeff said, not talking to, but talking with people. Yeah. And understanding really what motivates them and why they're engaging with us in the first place.
Okay. Anyone else have a tip, lesson to talk about?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just continually adapt. A community manager is not set in stone. Your job title will never be the same day to day. And as we add a new evangelist on every month or so, we find there's this whole other realm of things we could be doing that we had no idea before. So keeping that open mind and, listening, he's completely right. It's listening to what people want to hear, what they want to go to, what they want to see, and dealing, from even an organizer and attendee standpoint, it's like you have to think about what you're saying and then continually adapt for sure.
I don't know if this is a phrase that you're familiar with, Katie, from journalism and publishing, but I just recently learned this phrase, murder your darlings. And I just think it so succinctly sums up what the daily experience can be like, especially at a smaller startup. So, given that I'm just working from the beginning to really build something hopefully big, every day it's about recognizing that even if I spent days and days sourcing material and looking at what our competitors are doing or thinking about what our community members are engaging most, and I create a Skillshare magazine and it goes out on the homepage, and then we realize it just kind of looks like a community college homepage, it just has to go. And I have to be okay with that, because it's not necessarily what's gonna get our message out in a way that is communicated properly to the people who are inspired by X, Y, and Z, not ABC. So one, murder your darlings, and I think the other thing is all team all hands-on from an internal standpoint is something that I'm so adamant about. And I think that whether it's ticketing and support and just like getting your people into whatever system you're using, or Gmail if you're at that point, to getting your people to actually engage in the online or offline experiences that your community members are having, it's just like unacceptable if they're not, because every single person at your company or in your effort has to understand what's going on the proverbial or literal ground to be able to make smart decisions about moving your community forward.
Right. Yeah, and that's an important too. It's yes, we're community managers, but I think it's an all hands approach from within the company and trying to educate those that might not, et cetera.
Yeah.
So
My tip's pretty quick. Prioritize and then relentlessly execute. I think all of us know that we have 57 different jobs on 57 different days. And for me, it always goes back to what's the top business goal and am I executing against that? And if it means that I'm taking time to go to events because building relationships in person is the top goal, darn right, I'm going to be at every single event possible. That can change over time, which is when you need to reprioritize. But for me, that's the best tip I can give is don't get lost in the swamp. Always have a clear goal of what you're supposed to be working on first, second, all the way down to last, and then execute the shit out of it.
That's awesome. Well, that's a great way to end. Sorry we can't do Q&A, but definitely tweet to us all that info. We obviously are on Twitter and would be happy to answer those questions. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.